Jane Jensen. Welcome to Tech Talk with Daniel Albu.
Thank you for having me on.
As a fan of your games, I'll start by saying that it's truly an honor to talk to you today. So thank you for taking the time to join me for this conversation. And since we're short on time, I say we get right to it and start at the beginning.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
How did you get into programming?
Programming. I graduated from college in 1983, and I majored in computer science. At that time, we were working with big mainframes, like Hewlett-Packard mainframes at my college, and they had a relationship with Hewlett-Packard, so I went to work with Hewlett-Packard right after graduation. And that's how I got into programming.
And what systems did you get to work on as a systems programmer for Hewlett-Packard?
Well, we had big mainframes, and we programmed in Pascal at that time. And I was working on various projects, a lot of networking software, and we would actually get huge dumps, like binary dumps from customers who had a problem. And we'd have to learn how to read the dumps and find the issues. It was pretty cool. Yeah.
So basically you got the logs from the customers and then you had to debug the system locally according to those logs?
Yeah, and they were in binary, just zeros and ones.
Wow. So what did you do with these binary logs? How did you decode them? Did you have a decompiler?
I mean, you knew the pattern of 0 and 1s for your code. And you knew where you would find the various buffers where the data was held. And I honestly can't remember. It's been 40 years, but yeah, it was pretty cool learning how to do that.
Wow. Awesome.
When I was there, I started out doing a database interface, but at Hewlett-Packard, it was like the most prestigious jobs were the lowest. I just kept going down levels in the operating system, because the status jobs were like really low level hardware related kind of stuff. And so that's how I ended up in the networking arena, which is basically one level up from pure hardware. But I didn't really enjoy it. I mean, I kind of it was a challenge to get there, but once I was there, it was kind of boring. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's something we all tend to do. We tend to go for what's status and not necessarily what we enjoy, until I got into gaming, that is.
So in 1989, you got your first PC, and the first computer games you dove into were Sierra's own Manhunter and King's Quest IV.
Right.
What hooked you about those games?
Well, at the time I was writing fiction on the side. I was working on a novel while I worked full-time as a programmer. And I just love the story aspects of the games, and was really hooked on the cute little graphics. And because previously I'd only played like Colossal Cave and Text Adventures, I just became obsessed with them. And I guess it was, just the combination of the story and the graphics. And I've always loved puzzles. So just, the puzzles involved and the whole package, really.
And were you intrigued by how they were able to program such games to run on the computers of the time, which had no memory or 64K memory?
Yeah. I don't know that I really thought about that. I just thought, what an amazing, application for home computers. And I was really interested in getting into it somehow.
And did you ever think while playing them that this could be your career path?
I did. After I played those first two games, I ordered everything else in the Sierra's catalog. And, those were the days where you got the hint books with the red glasses. And I ordered all those. And
wow.
I just became really obsessed. And I thought, I would really love to work for this company at some point.
They made so much money off of you that they were able to hire you eventually.
Right.
And you didn't pirate any of the Sierra games? Because sometimes, the people I interview pirated some of them.
At that time, like you said, it was around 1989. I didn't have any clue how you would pirate something, or even that pirating was a thing,
Gotcha. So when exactly did you start working at Sierra Online?
I think it was around 1989 because I think GK1 came out in 93.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was around 1990. Anyway, so I had gone to Germany with my husband, who is my ex-husband now. He had gotten a job there, so I went there. We were there about 9 months, and I was just playing games the whole time. And we split up, so I came back to the States, and Hewlett Packard had a hiring freeze at the time, so I couldn't go back to my old job. So I was looking around, and I wrote to Sierra, and I said, "Look, I love your stuff. I can program, I can do QA, I can write. I'll do anything at the company at all." And I sent them I attached a short story that I had written, and so I heard back from them. They said, "Yeah, come out and interview." It just felt, the day that I went to interview, I got back in my car at the end of the day, and it was like that moment where, the waitress is approached by the director of a Hollywood movie who's like, "You'll be perfect for my new movie." It was like that life-changing. It was like, the heavens opened and what, it was just like, I was willing to take any cut and pay or anything to go do that job.
And what was the interview process at Sierra like?
Well, at the time they had just started a writer's block. This was an era where they had recently hired Bill Davis from Hollywood, and Ken and Roberta were trying to make Sierra more of a, they'd been really a kind of a small mom and pop operation. And they were trying to make it more Hollywood. And so they'd hired Bill Davis, who had Grammys from animation shorts, as the creative director. And he had the idea of starting this writer's block, which is basically to help a lot of the designers at the time, like Al Lowe and Scott and, the Coles and Roberta, whatever, to Jim Walls, who was doing Police Quest, who was not a writer. He was a cop. Basically, the writer's block was to help the designers elevate the writing in the games and also write documentation and things like that. And because I had submitted a short story, that's what they were interested in me for. And it was interesting because the guy who was running the writer's block, who interviewed me, I can't remember his name now, but he was no longer there by the time I came to work. He had been fired, but he had brought me in because he was reading my short story and the last page was missing. Somehow had gotten detached and lost. It was, and he was so upset that the last page was missing that he suddenly realized, oh, well, I must be really engaged in this story if I'm that upset about it. So anyway, yeah, I interviewed with various people in the writer's block and with some of the people in the company. I think it's all a blur. It was just like this amazing day.
Wow. So you created a cliffhanger by mistake and that got you the job. Well played.
Yeah. I don't know if I just didn't send the last page or if it got lost in the files, but yeah.
And what was your first day at Sierra like?
I don't remember my first day exactly. Moved to Oakhurst, got a little apartment. Right away, the writer's block had this room where we all were together. And I remember my first project pretty well, which was Police Quest 3, working with Jim Walls. Like I said, he was a cop. He was not a writer at all. So he was happy to let me write all the dialogue for the game and the documentation. And that was so much fun because, I was a huge fan of these games, and to get to just come into a game like that and add all that detail was great.
So you're credited for documentation and additional written material on Police Quest 3. And so the documentation, does that include also the technical documentation, like how to install the game and troubleshooting and such, or just the backstory and the manual? Back in the day, they had a bit of a lore inside the manual itself.
I know for sure it was the police manual that came with it, where there was more backstory and stuff in it. But I can't remember if, they might have had a sheet of paper or something that was the generic how to install kind of thing.
And did you also add dialogue and either jokes or plot to the game itself?
I think I did all the dialogue for that game.
Wow, all of the dialogue.
I think so, or at least as I recall. I mean, like I said, Jim wasn't that big a fan of writing, but I honestly can't remember at this point.
Still in 1991, you were credited as a game designer on EcoQuest, The Search for Cetus. Mm-hmm. What can you tell me about your work on this game?
So that was the second game I worked on, and that was a concept that Bill Davis had. He was really into animation, and he wanted to do a new game series that had his animated characters in it, and it was supposed to be ecological. So he took two of the writers from the writer's block. It was myself and Gaino Hain, and we came up with the design and then worked together on putting that game together. And then I think Gaino went on to work on EcoQuest 2. So I didn't have anything to do with that one. But yeah, it was my first design, actual puzzles and all of that. It was fun. But, Bill had really strong ideas about what he wanted for the story. So he was kind of like supervising that one.
So was the original concept supposed to be an edutainment game? Or as you were working on the game, you realized that it should be an edutainment game?
I don't remember, but it seems like the concept itself was pretty educational. So I think it was edutainment.
Still in 1991, you were credited as Maybot, fashion consultant to the Cosmos in Space Quest 4, Roger Wilco and the Time Rippers. Let's watch a clip.
No.
Hiya, hun. I'm Maybot, fashion consultant to the Cosmos. What can we, do with you today?
Well, this is kind of hard to explain.
Oh, let me guess. You want something for someone very special. Someone who died to get the latest in high galactic fashion.
Please stop. Oh.
So, I think how did you get this role?
I think that was one of the first voice narration games. And so at that time, we were just pulling people from in-house to do the voices. They were not professional actors, as you can hear. It was just like, hey, come audition to do a part in Space Quest. And yeah, it's so embarrassing.
You shouldn't be embarrassed. It's great.
I think I was also a flapper in Laura Bow or something. That you're jogging my memory.
Yep. In 1992, you continued your voice acting career when you played the flapper in The Dagger of Amun-Ra. Let's watch a clip.
Oh, no.
You haven't seen the Countess come into the speakeasy yet, have you? I've been waiting here for hours.
The Countess?
Yeah. The Countess Lavinia Waldorf Carlton. I'm supposed to meet her here.
Sorry, haven't seen her.
Oh my God.
But if I do, I'll be sure and let you know.
So how did you get
you
this
see my broad
role?
range there.
Yeah. It sounds very different. It's not like it's Maybot 2.0.
I don't know.
Still in 1992, you ditched your voice acting career and were credited as writer, designer, and director on King's Quest 6, Air Today, Gone Tomorrow. Could you share some...
I don't think I was director. I think that was Bill Skirvin.
I know, but in the credits, you are in the directed by.
Weird.
Just so you know.
Okay.
Could you share some insights into the creative process behind designing the puzzles and the narrative arc in King's Quest 6?
So, by that time, I had been at Sierra for a year or so, and typically, Roberta did work with another person on her King's Quest games, just because she liked to stay more high level and not be on site every day. So we knew that was coming up, and several of us in the writer's block were sort of vying for that opportunity. I was really excited about being able to do that since I love King's Quest. And so I was given the chance to do it. And Roberta and Ken had this beautiful house on the lake there at Bass Lake. And I would go over to her house in the mornings, and she had this huge sheet of like this huge pad of paper. It must have been like 2 feet by 3 feet or something. And her process was just to write ideas and scribble out diagrams and stuff on this notepad. And so we worked together for a couple weeks, I think, on ideas for the game. And then I went in and, started typing it all up and, filling it out a little bit, and came up with the final design document, which she reviewed and approved and made notes on. And then we went into production. It was really amazing.
And did you find it difficult to write a King's Quest game, given that you were also a fan of the series at that point?
There were a few things that I had, a few ideas that she nixed that were just more like, I had this whole idea about, I can remember that there was a clown in the court, this big dumpy clown character. And I was kind of had this whole thing about how he was secretly in love with Cosima, and, anyway, it was too complicated for King's Quest. So she nixed that, but she had a really clear vision, like, this is what King's Quest is, and this is what it's not. And so, we came up with a great design, I think, and I had tons of fun working on it. And, it was really good too, to just see how clear of a vision she had always. And now I've told the story in interviews, but we'd send her builds. I think she was even in Europe at the time. And she would take 4 or 5 days to play through it and just send us back like 20 pages of detailed notes. And it was, and of course we went through and we fixed everything and we did everything she said. But it was just great to have that experience of watching her, really be the visionary behind the game and direct the game. And it's okay to be picky. It's okay to really say, move this pixel or whatever. So it taught me a lot to get me ready to do my own game.
Now I'm intrigued. I want to see all of the things that you suggested that were nixed before the game went into production. Maybe someday we'll get, King's Quest 6, the Jensen cut or the uncut.
I don't think that we ever did any art for any of that stuff.
And was the thing with the clown too complicated puzzle-wise or plot-wise?
I think it was a little dark. I tend to be much darker than Roberta, and, melancholy, and I don't know. She just didn't think it was really necessary, which is, probably good. I mean, King's Quest 6 was a pretty packed game as it was.
Now I really want to see King's Quest 6, the Jensen cut. In 1993, the CD-talkie version of King's Quest 6 was released. Did you take part in the production of this version?
No, I think when that was going on, I was already working on GK1. But I remember being very excited that Robbie Benson was going to play the lead character. It was like our first Hollywood star at that time.
And still, some of the other voice actors in King's Quest 6 are still Sierra employees, like Josh Mandel, for example.
Mm. Yeah, the people that could actually act.
Still in 1993, you're credited as game designer and director on Gabriel Night Sins of the Fathers.
Yes.
When did you come up with the original concept for the game?
Well, after King's Quest 6 went out, I was told I would have a chance to propose my own series. And which obviously was like huge for me. I always wanted to do always thought it would be a good idea to do an investigative series of some sort, because it really meshed well with the puzzles, because that's what an investigator does, is he talks to people and he finds evidence and all that kind of thing. So I knew it had to be some kind of investigative game. And I've always been interested in the paranormal, so I wanted to do something with the paranormal. And so I was initially thinking he would be like an Indiana Jones kind of professor of parapsychology somewhere, and, you know, these would be his cases. But when I started working on the story a little bit more detail and had the idea of having a mirrored plot, and like pulling like inquisitors into it, that was kind of a key idea, was having a character whose family history involved decades and centuries of witch hunters and inquisitors, and how is this modern person, you know, who, you know, deal with that kind of legacy, and how could you take something like that and make it modern, where it's not just, you know, because obviously inquisitors are not nice, you know. I mean, they burned millions of innocent people and were terrible. But like, so how could you take that idea and make it something modern, but also something where it had a more modern sensibility of good and evil, and, you know, that things aren't always that black and white and concrete. And that's sort of where Gabriel Knight came from.
And you have cited The Serpent and the Rainbow and Angel Heart as inspirations behind Gabriel Knight 1. What elements in these movies did you find intriguing enough to incorporate in the game? You know, I think what I loved about Angel Heart was the whole metaphysical aspect of it, where, you know, the Robert De Niro character, which I don't want to spoil for anybody, but what was really going on with his character that you don't get until the very end, that whole, like, again, that sort of metaphysical souls, God and the devil. I love that aspect of it. And then, of course, the setting in New Orleans was so gritty and realistic. And I'd always been an Anne Rice fan, and a lot of her stuff is set in New Orleans. And of course the voodoo, and then Serpent and the Rainbow obviously is a movie about a man who goes to Haiti and to investigate voodoo culture there. Just such powerful imagery. I think what interested me about voodoo in particular is that juxtaposition of religion and, you know, I don't want to say evil, you know, just sort of more scary stuff, I guess, you know. It's like, it's a religion, but it's scary, you know. So, yeah, it just resonated with me a lot. I mean, that's the thing, is if something makes me feel intensely, then I feel like that's something that I can make the reader or the player, you know, I can make them feel like that too. And that's the whole point of writing a story, is to make people feel. True. And when it comes to the puzzles in the game, how many did you come up with organically as part of the original story? And how many were added later to break up the storyline and make the gameplay more engaging?
Well, typically, the way that I do a game is I first write the story outline, which is about 100 pages, and that's really focuses on the story. And while I'm doing that, if puzzles come to mind, I will, you know, put them in there. But it really is focused on the story. And then the next stage is to do the game design, which the game design Bible, and that's where all the puzzles are inserted and figured out, and enough to make it a full game. But that's also done before game production begins, really.
So the puzzles themselves, did you ever get to play a version of the game and then think to yourself, okay, maybe I should add another puzzle in this section, or maybe I should remove a puzzle from that section?
Not typically. I mean, you might tweak a puzzle, like this feels too easy or feels too hard. You know, I might edit a puzzle. I'm sure there have been instances where puzzles were added, but typically my when I do a game design Bible, it is it matches pretty closely with the final game.
And up until that point in time, Sierra used to have other Sierra employees serve as voice actors in the talkie versions of the games. So GK1 marked the shift towards using an all-professional voice actors cast and Hollywood stars as well. How did you manage to justify the increased budget necessary for this, especially considering the challenges of allocating resources for an original IP?
Well, I think we first got Stu Rosen, who was the director. He was a Hollywood director, voiceover director. And I can't remember, honestly, how we were put in touch with him, whether that was somebody Bill Davis knew or how we sort of made that connection. But he knew all the voiceover actors in Hollywood because he did tons of cartoons and audiobooks and things like that. So he suggested people for various roles, and we went to, to the head of production and to Ken and said, look, we can get these people, and at the time we got them for like cut rate. I mean, it was like minimum SAG or something, because it was one of the first games ever being done with voice then. And so Hollywood was really interested in sort of getting their foot in that door. So we got great rates on these incredible people, and the budget was approved for it because, I think Ken saw the value of having those kinds of names and having a Sierra product come out that had that kind of a cast to it. It was exciting.
Did you get to be in those recording sessions? Did you get to direct any of the voice actors?
I didn't direct. Stu Rosen was a director on that, and he's, like I said, a long time voice actor, director. But I did go on set, I think. So we flew to LA. I think it was at least the first 2 weeks. And we wanted to have, one session with every major character while I was there, so that we could be sure that we got the voice down. And then I had to go back to Sierra and, because I was involved in, the game production. We only had a year to do that game. So that was how it worked out. It was really fun being there on set. I would have loved to have been there for the whole thing.
And what music were you listening to during the production of Gabriel Knight 1? Is there a specific album or a song that transports you right back to the time when you were working on Gabriel Knight 1?
No, because I don't listen to any music when I write. I can't. It just like I have to be really focused on my own internal voices. And, most of the time we were working on that game, I was either writing, because I was sort of, staying ahead of the I think, like I said, we had a year to get that game out. And so I was still writing like the latter parts of it while they were actually producing the early parts of it. And I was director on it. So I was playtesting all the time and looking at art and all that. So I didn't really listen to much.
So no MC Hammer in the background while you're writing, the Voodoo Tales. Around that time, Sarah sent a lot of the writers to a story writing class with Robert McKee in LA.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that class helped you become a better storyteller?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I think that's where I got the whole idea of mirroring the plot, because it was really early on. Like, I think maybe we had just had the proposal approved, but I hadn't written the story yet. Super, super helpful. Yeah. In fact, Robert McKee has a book that I've recommended to lots of people.
About storytelling?
Mm-hmm. I think it's just called Story.
Original.
Like one of the things that he talked about was that every scene should do 2 or 3 things, right? So if Gabe goes to talk to Grandma, it establishes his family history. It sets, there'll be stuff in there that sets up something that's going to happen in the future. And, something about his personality, or, there has to be a lot going on in every scene. And I really tried to do that with GK1.
In 1994, you were credited for video on the Space Quest Collector's Edition. Do you remember what that credit was for?
The only thing I can think of is the Maybot thing.
Nope. It's remember. You in the current Inside Copy Space Quest Behind Closed Doors.
The Space Quest series has been a great inspiration to me. It helped me define what I wanted to do with my games. And what I didn't want to do.
Man. Where did you find this stuff?
Well, usually the research process for these interviews takes months, so I find stuff.
Wow.
In 1995, you were credited as game designer and writer on Gabriel Knight 2, The Beast Within. How soon after GK1 did you come up with a concept for this game?
I think it was right away, because GK1 came out with like barely made Christmas, which had been our goal. And it immediately got, even before it came out, it got a lot of press because we had taken, I think, day one to CES that year, and which was probably like in August or something like that. And so it was clear that it had gotten a really good reception. So I immediately started working on GK2.
And how did you adapt the puzzle design approach for GK2, knowing that the gameplay would be much more limited due to its FMV format compared to GK1?
I think what I said at the time, which is still my impression, is I really tried to make the mystery surrounding the werewolves more of a, mental conundrum. So it was more about like, what's really going on? What is there really a werewolf? Who's really behind this? Is it this person or that person? As opposed to, how do I open this safe? And, those sorts of hardcore puzzles. At the time we were really thinking, because GK1 had been fairly nerdy. I mean, it was, we had all those icons, and I'd really, with that game, tried to go back to like almost a feeling of when you had typed in your questions on the Sierra games. So GK2 was really a completely different approach of really trying to make it more mass market, for good or ill.
And speaking of technical limitations, GK2 had fewer CDs than Phantasmagoria, which came out 4 months prior to that, but offered a longer gameplay experience by eliminating duplicated scenes between CDs. Because in Phantasmagoria, one of the reasons why the gameplay was short is because there were many actions that you could perform in various days, which would require the same scene to be on various CDs. Now, in GK2, the gameplay itself is limited per day. So there are things that you need to do in day one to complete day one, and you can't do them in day two. And this resulted in a longer gameplay for GK2 as compared to Phantasmagoria, but this also resulted in a more linear progression of the game. Was this a design choice made to avoid that issue, or it just came out that way?
I remember there being a period where we were really fighting to get the CD size down. And I wasn't the primary responsibility on that. I can't remember if it was Bill Crow or who, but those are physical costs, and you want to lower your physical costs as much as you can per game. So I honestly can't remember, but I do remember us really trying to work to see how we could get the CD size down.
And did you have to change anything in the story to make it work?
I just really don't remember. Honestly, it's been so long. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like, well, if we can't go back here on this day, and it would be like, fine, that's fine, as long as you get to see it at some point. I do know that there was, we had a crazy, huge script. And I think the script was about 1,000 pages. And so there were cuts that were made before production began.
Do you still have that script?
Yeah.
Do you plan to release it anytime soon?
See, did we not release it with our Kickstarter? I don't remember. Maybe not. I'm sure I still have it somewhere. Anyway, there were cuts that would happen before production began, just because it was like, we cannot film all this, and so there was a whole chapter cut. And the producer, Sabina Duvall, I remember her taking me out and walking me around the lake and just being like, "Okay, Jane, we have to cut. We have to cut this." I was like, But there was a chapter where you played Ludwig in Neuschwanstein, and he was hiding stuff, and it's all this fun stuff. But that got cut. But it was the ambition of that was like we were too stupid to know that we couldn't do what we did at the time, because that game had wolves, it had horses, it had dream sequences in the snow, it had all this stuff that would be is so difficult to do in live action, and yet we did it.
Let's talk about the cast for a bit. Teddy, who played the wolf in Dances with Wolves, makes an appearance in the game as, Canis Lupus Lupus himself. This is him in Dances with Wolves on the left, and this is him in the game on the right.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
So how did you convince him to join the cast? Because he was just off an Academy Award-winning movie.
Wow. He was such a team player too. All I remember was that we had hired a wolf wrangler from LA, I'm sure, and he brought up his pack, and that's how we got that footage.
And he has some connections in Hollywood, apparently.
Apparently.
Now, being a fan of Stephen King, I bet you enjoyed the 1989 movie Pet Sematary. So was having Brad Greenquist, who played Victor in the movie, like a dream come true for you?
I mean, all the cast was so fun. I really mourn the fact that we weren't able to do more live action games. I mean, I understand why and the limitations of them, but it really was fun as a creator to work with live actors.
A few months back, an artist named Leandro da Silva created a preview of what GK2 would look like had it been a fully animated adventure game. Did you see that preview?
No.
Okay, so this is Gabriel Knight, The Beast Within, the animated adventure. So as you can see, you have Dean and Joanne in their animated forms. You see them both in the correct color palette as they are in the game. And here are a few scenes from the game itself. You see, even the backgrounds are animated.
Wow, I love it.
And there's also the main menu.
Pretty nice.
What do you think of creating or remaking an existing Gabriel Knight game using this art style?
I think it would be fun. I mean, it was so much fun working on GK1 remake. I mean, we did the 20th anniversary edition. It was around 2012, 2013. That was so fun to go back and revisit all that and have a chance to update the art and add new things. We added a couple new scenes and a couple new puzzles. So I would love to do that with GK2 and 3.
Now, Gabriel Knight 2 has been dubbed into several languages. One of the most notorious dubs is the French dubbing, where you can actually hear the voice actors flipping the script pages in the recording itself. But that's beside the point. I'm not sure if you've seen or heard any of the other dubs. So I want to share a clip I've created of all of the dubs I could find. And so I'd love to know which is your favorite pronunciation of Canis Lupus Lupus.
And how come paw prints found at the scene indicate an animal much larger than the zoo wolf species Canis lupus?
Et pourquoi les empreintes trouvées sur la place indiquent un animal plus gros que l'espèce du zoo Canus lupus?
Und wie kommt es, dass die Pfotenabdrücke am Tatort ein viel größeres Tier andeuten als die Rasse der Zoowölfe? Canis lupus.
Ah, e ancora, come mai le impronte trovate sulla scena del crimine apparterrebbero ad un animale molto più grande della specie presente allo zoo? Canis lupus?
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Thank you for that. That is so cool. I've never ever seen any of those.
You should listen to the French. You should listen to the French dubbing. Really,
everything's better in French.
Yeah, especially the page flips. Sounds magnificent.
Oh, yeah, great.
Why is Grace so angry in the game?
Are you talking about Beast Within?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, I think a lot of that has to do with casting. It's just the way Joanne really reacted to those scenes, and yeah. Joanne was really a wonderful person. She was a good friend of mine during the shooting.
So the extended version of my question was whether or not it was part of the writing of the game or the acting. So you answered my question.
I think she, the writing of it was definitely, she was annoyed in the writing, but I think Joanne played her a little bit more pissed than I necessarily would have envisioned it. But, she was great. I loved her.
Yep. So after GK2, you took a year off. What did you do in that year?
I believe I was working on Millennium Rising, which was my first original novel. Or it might have been writing the novel version of GK2. One of those.
Or the novel version of
at the
GK1.
Time I probably would have rolled right into GK3, but Sierra at that time was going through a lot of changes, and it just wasn't in production yet.
And accounting frauds. Changes in accounting frauds.
Oh no, I didn't know that. Great.
So in early 1997, you published the novelization of GK1, which I have right here.
Mm-hmm.
And you also started working on GK3. And later that year, you started sharing your designer diary entries on the Sierra website. What prompted you to share these behind-the-scenes stories of the production of GK3?
I think it was just for marketing, to try to get people engaged in the game.
Okay. In 1998, you published The Beast Within novelization. What did you change in your approach to novelization this time around?
Everything. So when I did GK1, which was my first novel, I had been writing a novel in the past, but I had never completed it. And so I thought, well, I'll just take the story and the script and I'll just massage it, right? And so GK1, the novel for GK1 was very, very true to the game and had the same dialogue lines and everything. And I think it just came out rather stilted. So for GK2, I just thought I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to sit down and start from scratch and write it out of my head and not try to incorporate exact dialogue lines and things like that from the game version. And I think it came out a lot more with a much better flow than the first book.
And how did you choose what to leave out and what to put in?
I don't think I left that much out. I just basically rewrote the story from my head instead of, cutting and pasting dialogue lines and trying to keep it exact.
On February 22nd, 1999, the Sierra Oakhurst facility was shut down, resulting in the termination of approximately 2/3 of its employees. What do you remember about that day?
I don't remember when the building was closed because I had already moved up to Seattle, I think. I do remember a day, which was before that, when we were all gathered in the local Oakhurst movie theater. And Ken gave a talk, and we were all handed envelopes, and we had to open our envelopes and see whether or not we were still had a job. And people who didn't, they had a pink slip basically in the envelope. And then Robert at the time was a producer, and so he had to go back to the office and basically talk to all the people that were being let go as their boss and work through that transition. So that was I remember that day very well. Obviously I was kept on at that point, but by the time that they actually closed the facility, I had moved up to Seattle because at that time there was a Sierra branch also in Seattle. And Robert had previously moved to Seattle to work on a Sting project. So I was already living here at that time. So I wasn't in Oakhurst when they actually locked the doors.
So at the time, there was no fear that GK3 would be canceled because of them shutting down the Oakhurst facility.
No, I don't remember that. I mean, GK3 was rocky all the way through, but I don't remember that particular thing being an issue.
Okay. Still in 1999, the Gabriel Knight Mysteries Collector's Edition was released. Did you take part in the production of this collector's edition? This huge big box?
I don't think very, very directly. I was waiting to see if I had that up on my walls. Oh, no. I have a box like that somewhere. I mean, it was basically the first, was it the 2 games and the first book, I think were in that?
The 2 games, the first book, demo of the third, and the soundtrack of the second and the first. Mm-hmm.
So Robert was probably more involved with that soundtrack than I was.
On November 19th, 1999, Gabriel Knight 3, Blood of the Sacred, Blood of the Damned, was released. I have everything, Jane. Everything.
I can see that.
I'll start by saying that even though I'm not a fan of 3D and adventure games, I think that GK3 was the only 3D adventure game at the time in which the 3D was justified and was properly utilized in the gameplay itself. The ability to move the camera in 3D while keeping the classic point-and-click mouse functionality was truly a work of art. So thank you for that.
Oh, good.
Now back to the show. How did you adapt your puzzle design approach for Gabriel Knight 3, knowing that the gameplay would be much broader this time than ever before with the 3D environments and the 3D camera movement?
Well, I think for each of the games, I knew in advance what the technology would be. Like I went on set and watched Phantasmagoria being filmed when I was working on the GK2 story. And similarly, I had, I knew GK3 was going to be in 3D, and I had a chance to test various 3D games. So I really, in each case, I tried to approach it with the mindset of like, how do I tell a story with this technology? How do I maximize this technology? And so for GK3, I really wanted to use the 3D, have stuff be under a table or, things where you would have to move the camera in order to solve the puzzle. And then, of course, there's a really big puzzle in GK3, which is Le Serpent Rouge, which uses the landscape of the Rennes-le-Château area. And so, trying to figure out how to do that with 3D and, make that integrated into the idea of 3D. So I did really try to work with that technology specifically. Because otherwise, it's like, there has to be some advantage, especially since we were losing the live actors, there has to be some benefit to going to 3D.
Well, ironically, the reason why I mentioned it is because all of the 3D adventure games, even from LucasArts, had 3D because they thought this was the next big thing, and not because it had anything to do with the game itself. In most of the games, they'd either have pre-rendered backgrounds, and so the 3D aspect was kind of gone because it was like a 2D adventure game, but with 3D characters, and the only gimmick was that you have various angles in each scene, but that's not real 3D. With Gabriel Knight 3, you could actually move the camera and the backgrounds were not pre-rendered. You could actually move freely. And also you could skip the walking by, moving the camera to a door and open the door, and Gabriel pops in immediately afterwards and opens the door. So well played.
Good. Well, I remember we had a lot of trouble with the engine on that. And Scott Bias, who was our lead engineer, he ended up having to rewrite a whole engine to do what we really wanted to do for that game.
Leah Remini at the time was the star of King of Queens. Did you try to approach her to reprise her role as Grace?
Gosh, I'm just drawing a blank. I know we had Tim back for GK3.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe, Leah might not have been available.
Okay. And how soon after GK3 was released did you leave Sierra?
It was immediately. I mean, it was weird because I was the last of the old adventure game designers still at that facility, which was, I can't even know who owned it at that point, if it was Sendant or if they'd already sold out. But, all the other games going on there at that Seattle office were now full-blown 3D action games, and I was like the last adventure game designer. And, there was, I can't even remember who was in management. I remember my direct producers, but anyway, the game was approved for shipping and manufacturing, and there was just no reason for me to go in anymore. There was no goodbye. There was no anything, it was just over. It was really strange.
So immediately after the game was released, like the game was in stores and you quit?
It wasn't even in stores. I think, it was once we had approved this is the final master, then it went off to manufacturing, and there were, several weeks of, or maybe even hardcore QA testing on various devices. I mean, it took a while. It was probably a month or more before it actually was released. At that point, it was just, like I said, testing on various machines and that kind of final QA. But I remember finally getting the call saying, okay, it's finally, it finally is releasing. And it was a relief because it took a while, like I said.
In 2010, Gray Matter was released. What, in your opinion, was the most rewarding aspect working on Gray Matter compared to your previous projects?
I love the story of Gray Matter. I love the main characters, Sam and David. I love the whole neurobiology aspect of it. So that was really fun. I love the art style, but I really didn't get to work much with the team. So we had several different teams on that one. It started out with let's see. I know I flew into the Hungarian team that had initially started it, and then they got funding from a German publisher, and then the German publisher took it away from them and they gave it to a team that was in Paris. And I wasn't super involved. I mean, I wrote the full game design Bible, with all the puzzles and everything, and I would get art to review and get builds to review, but I only visited the Paris team on site once. So it was a little bit more of a remote process for me than I had, in GK3, I'd always been like seated with the team, actually working with them every day. So that was different. And then, there were a lot of problems with that German publisher. So it was kind of an antagonistic atmosphere between the publisher and the team. And yeah, it was sort of difficult in that regard.
In 2014, Gabriel Knight Sins of the Father's 20th anniversary edition was released. What was it like to revisit some of the puzzles in GK1 with fresh eyes?
it was super fun. I mean, it was interesting to look at work you did 20 years ago. And I thought it was great. I mean, I thought maybe, I think some of it, again, seemed a little bit overly nerdy and overly complicated, like all the different icons and things. So I think we did try to simplify it a little bit, but all the characters and the story and the Irish priest and the puzzles, the big puzzles like Voodoo Code and the drums and all that stuff was still so much fun to me.
And 6 months ago, we celebrated the 30th anniversary of GK1. And so I wanted to know if you were to
I'm
create
still alive. Wow.
We all are.
Yay. Confetti gun.
I was 10 when this came out. Hopefully I'm still 20. And it's the 10th anniversary of GK1. So
Yeah.
If you were to create a 30th anniversary edition, what approach would you take? Would you use AI to clean up the original voice recordings and re-implement them in the game? Would you get Dean Erickson and film the entire game as an FMV game? Or maybe something else?
I wouldn't change the GK1 20th anniversary edition. I mean, I would rather work on GK2 and 3, to bring them up to date, honestly. But what a great idea. Wouldn't it be great if AI could fix the interlacing on GK2? And man, that would be awesome. But I don't think they can do that.
I mean, when I talked to Cesar from Phoenix Online, then he told me a thing that I realized early on, that you didn't use the original voice recordings because you only had the compressed in-game sound files and not the original DAT tapes of the recordings. So you couldn't really use it in a game from 2014 in terms of sound quality. But now with advancements in AI, you can take this recording and make it a crisp new recording of the original actors and implement it in the game. So
yeah, I mean, that would be cool. It would be fun. I really, we had a great cast on the remake, but it would, all things being equal, it would be great to go back to the original cast.
Now, I know that as part of Son of Sequels Kickstarter, you've written an entirely new Gabriel Knight story. Some may consider it a GK4 or a prologue to GK4. What can you share about this new story?
Well, this is actually really interesting because, and I've never told this to anybody. So, as you know, I've done many, many other things since Gabriel Knight. I've written over 50 romance novels. I've did a ton of casual games. I work with, Agatha Christie, all kinds of stuff. But anyway, so really my head has not been in GK for quite a long time. I mean, it was great when we got to revisit it for the 20th anniversary edition, but that was, 10 years ago. So, and, I'm always having opportunities to interview and stuff or people, and I'm just like, gosh, that was so long ago. I don't even remember or necessarily care about that anymore. Well, so I've been writing this big, epic metaphysical thriller again. It's called Babel right now, and it's almost ready to go to the publisher. I've been working on that, and about a month ago, and Bob's been bugging me for this GK story. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll get to it when I'm done with this book. I had this dream. And it was like anybody who's a writer or musician knows that if you have a dream where you get the entire, it's happened to Bob a couple times, the entire song is in the dream. I had this dream with the complete plot of a new Gabriel Knight story. And I woke up and I'm just like, what the hell? I'm scribbling. So I sat down that morning and I wrote this story, and which is basically the first chapter of a new Gabriel Knight story. So yeah, that's how it happened. And it was so funny because it's my psyche has not been there. I haven't been thinking I need a new Gabriel Knight story or, even thinking about Gabriel Knight. So it was just an amazing gift to have gotten that. So yeah, I basically got a whole new story for GK4, and it's funny because the idea I had originally had for GK4 is basically now GK5, which is going to be really annoying to the fans because even if we manage to get GK4 done, they're still not going to get like the game that they thought they were going to get. But yeah, it's really fun. So we're currently working on having some art put together for it and, getting it ready for the Kickstarter. But, I would like to make it a full game. So, now that the licenses are with Microsoft, I think there's at least a chance of that, So who knows?
First of all, you should get more sleep because your dreams are awesome. And and so how long is this short story or story?
I think it's about 20 pages. I'd have to bring it up. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not resolved. It's basically just the start of a new story. But, I'm not going to publish, even if I had it written all already. It's the story for a new game, so I don't want to put that out too prematurely. But it'll be basically the introduction to a new Gabriel Knight story.
So basically, it ends with a cliffhanger, much like the story you presented in your interview at Sierra.
Yes, exactly.
And maybe this will convince Microsoft to release GK4. So the same tactics all over again.
That's right.
Now, if Gabriel Knight ever gets picked up as a miniseries or a movie, would you like it to be an adaptation of one of the 3 games or an entirely new story?
That's a good question. We've had so many people, over the years until maybe the last 2 years, at least once a year, sometimes more than once a year, we have somebody who gets a hold of me who says, I really want to make a movie or I really want to do a TV series. And Activision was just not interested in that at all. So again, I think now that Microsoft has the license, there's more of an opportunity for that. I think it'd be a good series because, it's kind of more of a series format concept. It would be great to see. Gosh, I would love to see the first 3 games done as seasons of a TV show. But, at this point, whatever would get it to happen would be good. You want to adapt it, you want to do new stories, fine, whatever.
And if it's an entirely new story, how would you recap the first 3 stories? Would it be previously on Gabriel Knight?
I don't know. See, that's why it should be my stories. You're right.
Now, one of the things I've been interested in knowing is during your time at Sierra, did you get to play any of the LucasArts adventure games? And if so,
I like them.
Which were your favorites?
I love Monkey Island and the Indiana Jones games, of course. I still remember those pretty well.
Yeah.
Is it Sam and Max?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like that one, the first one. I can't remember. What other ones did they have?
Well, they have The Dig, and they have It's in Outer Space, The Dig. They have Full Throttle with the bike gangs, and they have Curse of Monkey Island, Grim Fandango, which was in 3D.
Grim Fandango, yeah. Mm-hmm. That was fun.
Day of the Tentacle.
Yeah, they were great. They were kind of our direct competition, so I was pretty familiar with all their stuff.
Now, before we conclude our conversation, I have a few questions from our viewers and some of your former colleagues.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Dean Erickson asks, and I'm not even kidding, Dean Erickson actually wanted me to ask you, who's your favorite FMV actor ever?
Oh, no pressure. I would say it's a tie between Gabriel, Dean Erickson, and the actor who played Von Glauer.
Peter Lucas. He was in Dancing with the Stars.
I was going to say Peter Lucas. Thank you. Yes, both of them were so great.
I have an interesting relationship with Dean Erickson. I contact him every February and ask him to come in for an interview. And he politely declines and tells me to contact him again the following year. But this year, this February, I was already prepared with getting rejected by him. But I also wanted to tell him that I plan to interview you sometime in 2024. And so during my conversation with him in February, that's when I asked him if he had any questions for you. And this was his question. And he asked me to grill you good. Grill her good were his exact words.
Thanks, Dean.
An artist who contributed to Gabriel Knight 2 asks, during production, did you experience a sense of competition with other games in development, similar to what we felt on our teams?
Not at Sierra. I think there might have been a Tex Murphy game out around that time. There was something that came out while we were in production that was live action, and I remember us looking at that and thinking, like, we have to be better than that. But I can't remember exactly what it was. Or it might have been Seventh Guest, actually, because they had the zooming camera and the live actors coming on screen. Yeah. I think it was.
You were better than that. So mission accomplished.
That's nice of you to say.
Robert Holmes asks, what musical theme from your games that isn't the main theme is a favorite of yours?
There's, in Gray Matter, actually, I think David's theme. And I think Raleigh sang on that, so.
Great answer. Ron Wrighton asks, Grace and Gabriel's conversation on the bridge in the final scene of GK2 is very powerful. What were you trying to convey in that scene?
I remember that scene and I can see it, but I don't remember the dialogue.
You want me to read the dialogue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Grace says, I'm going back to school soon.
Mm.
It's all arranged. Gabriel says, don't do that. Grace says, you didn't even want me on this case. And Gabriel says, it came up so quickly. And it ends with...
Excuses.
There's always a price, Gabriel. Don't you know that by now?
I think it was just reiterating the themes of the game, which was, Gabriel, the werewolves represented Gabriel struggling with his physical nature as opposed to the spiritual quest that he's supposed to be on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nian asks, why did you name the GK comic The Temptation? What was Gabriel being tempted to do?
I think that was related to the Von Glauer appearance in the comic. Where he says, if you had accepted the gift, you could have been a god, It's that old, biblical temptation.
Okay. Paradise 1990 asks, to me, Gray Matter is equally beautiful in terms of story, setting, and soundtrack as Gabriel Knight. It has stuck with me since its release, and I frequently come back to it every few years. Do you still receive any type of feedback on this game? Additionally, I noticed that a sequel was in the works but was cancelled. Does that mean a story for the sequel was already developed?
Well, that's nice. I had an idea for the sequel. I was going to go to Angela's home island and deal with that sort of the genetic gifts of telekinesis, and but it didn't really get very far. I think it might have been 20-page story treatment or something like that.
And one final question from me. What are your plans for 2024, 2025, and how can people stay in touch with you and your work?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I decided at the end of last year to leave romance, at least for the time being, and get back to some of the sort of more metaphysical thriller, Dan Brown kind of stuff that I was writing when I did Millennium Rising and Dante's Equation in the early 2000s. So I'm just finishing up a big epic sort of sci-fi thriller called Babel, which may not be the final title. So I'm hoping to see that published this next year. I'd actually really like to get involved in a GK4 as a writing project this year. We'll see about that. And I have some other ideas for thrillers, but I've also been working part-time in hospice and home care. It's just something I really felt I wanted to do. Now that I'm no longer necessarily driven by having to write for an income constantly. So that's taking up a lot of my time. And taking a dream interpretation course, just getting, trying to get back into some more I guess spiritual practices like meditation, and yeah, that's my year. You can find me. I have a page on Facebook, Jane Jensen, and I'm not on there very often, but that's pretty much where you can reach me right now. And that's it. I will probably be starting a new author website at some point in the next year.
Well, keep me posted. I'll post about it in all of our social channels.
Thank you.
Well, Jane, it's truly been an honor talking to you today. And I hope we'll talk again soon when Microsoft comes to its senses and gets the ball rolling on GK4. But until then, thank you for everything.
Thank you so much for asking me on and all the research that you did. There were some really fun things to see. I appreciate that.
It was my pleasure.
Bye.